My name's Stacey Wetters. I'm from the Local Authority Stakeholder Engagement team within the Funding Directorate of ESFA. And this afternoon, I'm going to be talking to you about DSG management plans. Alex has already mentioned in the chat there will be some time to ask any verbal questions at the end of the presentation. Alternatively, you can add questions into the chat box throughout the presentation, and we've got colleagues on hand might be able to answer before then. If there's anything we can't answer, for example, if it's too complex for now or it's personal to your local authority, we might take those away and respond afterwards. Okay, so the DSG Conditions of Grant 22 to 23 requires that any local authority with an overall deficit on its DSG account at the end of 21-22 financial year, or whose DSG surplus has substantially reduced during the year, must be able to present a plan to the department for managing their future DSG spend. This became a requirement in the 2021 Conditions of Grant. So to support local authorities in forming a plan, we developed the DSG Management Plan template. It was developed alongside local authority representatives, as well as internal teams from Funding, SEND and Children's Services, and we published it in September 2020 along with a comprehensive guidance document. Since then, it has been updated using feedback from users, and version 5, which I'm talking through today, was published back in April. The template can be downloaded from Document Exchange, and the supporting guidance can be found on gov.uk. We currently have 3 main programmes to support local authorities in their efforts to improve their delivery of SEND services for children and young people, whilst maintaining financial sustainability. The Safety Valve programme involves a small number of local authorities with the largest deficits. We've got the Delivering Better Value, or DBV programme, which is supporting 55 local authorities with less severe deficits. And then here at the ESFA, we're providing support for LAs who are not in Safety Valve or DBV, as well as helping local authorities to prepare for going into Safety Valve and DBV. So local authorities who are involved in the Safety Valve discussions or the DBV programme should use the management plan template to submit their plans to the department. However, we do encourage all local authorities to use it because it comprehensively covers aspects we'd expect to see in a management plan. All local authorities should have a plan in place to manage their high needs budgets, whether they're in deficit or not. We do understand that it is high needs putting pressures on budgets. Therefore, it's imperative that finance and SEND come together to develop a joint plan, and the template should facilitate this. The template will help local authorities monitor their current provision and spend and how initiatives are having an impact or might have an impact in the future. It will highlight areas where local authorities may wish to review provision and spending. And we hope that summaries and graphs will help local authorities to present high-level information to their stakeholders. And we realise that implementing initiatives, reconfiguring provision and bringing spend in line with income and repaying deficits will take time for some local authorities. So we've developed the template in such a way that it's intended to be a live document, which is updated regularly to monitor the pressures, risks, impacts of initiatives, how DSG funding is being spent, and so on. So your management plan should reflect the most current forecast DSG position and be published on your local authority's website. We believe the template will be particularly useful when discussing and sharing complex funding information with stakeholders. For example, your school's forum, parent and carer groups, local head teacher boards or council committees. We expect the plan to be updated and presented at schools forum meetings and any high needs subgroups regularly, at least on a termly basis. The LA should aim to present their plan to the schools forum in time for budget planning discussions for 2023 to 2024 and before the deadline for block movement requests if submitting one. And we expect the management plan to be signed off by the Director of Children's Services and the Section 151 officer within your local authority and across other areas which have also contributed. So these are some of the reviews we will carry out when we receive a local authority's management plan. Just to note, this is not a comprehensive list and it will differ depending on what programme the local authority is participating in, whether that's Safety Valve, DBV or ESFA support. So we'll look, see that there's clear narrative around the initiatives and a clear link to their impact on outcomes for young people, EHCPs and finances. We do receive some plans that are good on finances, but not the corresponding SEND narrative, and vice versa, where there are good initiatives, but these are not reflected in the figures. This is where it's important that SEND and finance teams come together. We expect to see clear deliverable initiatives and their impact reflected on EHCPs and the corresponding finances. We will look to see if there is correlation between the data and the finances, and if not, has this been explained in the narrative? So for example, a 5% increase in EHCPs with a drop in related expenditure, unless there is a clear initiative linked to it. We'll look to see if risks and assumptions have been clearly laid out. Regarding EHCP numbers and provision, have past trends been used, or is there a detailed analysis of children's current and future needs? We will look at whether the plan reaches an in-year balance. So just to note, where safety valve agreements have been reached, local authorities have reconfigured their high needs provision to reach an in-year balance position within an allocated timescale. We'll check that local authority has used pre-recoupment published DSG allocation data, and we will check that the DSG is being used in line with regulations and the conditions of grant. Just to note there, ultimately, it's the local authorities and the Section 151 officers' responsibility to ensure compliance. So going on to the template, the first tab you'll see is the cover tab. This is where you'll select your local authority name from a drop-down list. Once you select your local authority, the template will populate with your data. There's a cell to enter the date the management plan was last modified and a cell to enter the version number if you wish. Below that is a local authority change log, which is for your internal use. So the plan should be updated regularly to reflect the most recent forecast position. So this local authority change log allows you to record what changes are made, when and by who. The next tab is the introduction tab. This one doesn't require any user input, it's purely for information. So on here, you've got a guide to the different colours used within the template. Following that, there's some information on the purpose of completing a management plan. Below this, the template content section provides links which allow you to navigate through the template quickly. If you scroll down further, the data section explains where the pre-populated data has come from, together with links to that published data. Following that, there's a bit about how placements have been categorised. The way this was done was to make the template consistent with the high needs benchmarking tool. And then finally, there's a glossary of terminology used throughout the template. And users can also refer to the comprehensive guidance document on the DSG management plan gov.uk page. The executive summary tab provides a high-level overview of the current financial situation. At the top there is a summary of end-of-year positions. This data is automatically pulled through from elsewhere in the template. And then underneath, you've got tables to input your headline mitigations and pressures. So here we'd expect to see the impact of mitigations and pressures on finances and EHCPs, with comments in the column to the right to cross-reference where in the template these are reflected. It's also possible to add add tabs into the template if you wish to build your own summaries and models which are better suited to your stakeholders' needs. After that, you've got the summary tab. So this one comprises 3 free text boxes where you can write high-level summaries about priorities, strategies, and outcomes. As it's a summary, they should be about a paragraph each. The guidance document provides examples of things that should be considered here, but we've added a few to the slide. The summary page and the executive summary page we saw previously might be useful to take to the schools forum meetings, for example, to give an overview. Moving on, next is the financial tab. So this is your main financial plan. The summary table at the top provides the key figures at a glance. It contains calculation cells which pull data from the financial plan per funding block table below it. All the financial parts of the template have space for both mitigated and unmitigated budgets. The reason for this is so you can show how much you can save, and this will be useful when consulting with schools forums and other stakeholders about potential plans. So your mitigated forecast is your forecast after accounting for the cost reductions and invest to save measures, and your unmitigated forecast is your forecast prior to accounting for any cost reduction and investor save measures. So basically where you'd be if you did nothing. The savings row in the summary table is simply the difference between the mitigated and unmitigated budgets. So underneath, you've got the financial plan per funding block section. In relation to the DSG conditions of grants, any local authority required to provide information to the department will be expected to complete this level of financial detail as laid out in this table, and also share that with Schools Forum and other stakeholders. So this table enables you to forecast up to and including the 26-27 financial year, if you wish to go that far. We'd expect your actual spend to match your Section 251 outturn return data, and income should reconcile to the latest DSG allocation announcement for 23-24 financial year with a clear assumption for any in-year early years adjustments. Supporting narrative for any discrepancies or assumptions can be included in the additional comments box to the right-hand side of the table. You can't see that on the slide. And all expenditure should be input as a positive figure. All income should be input as a negative figure. So this will show a surplus as a negative, a deficit as a positive figure. So in this table, the first section is your expenditure. Second section is DSG income. The cells within this section should be used to input estimated income before any block transfers. So here you should include any assumptions on additional future funding, just making sure you add assumptions to the assumptions box on the LA specific tab. Your third section is the high needs block, other income. So cells within this section can be used to input any other income within the high needs block. So row 31 is specifically for CCG's contributions, and row 32 is a row to record any other high needs block income. And again, any supporting narrative for this data can be input into the additional comments to the right of the table in column S. The fourth section is for block transfers. The block that cash is being moved to is seeing an income, so that figure should be negative. The block that cash is being moved from is seeing an outgoing, so that figure should be positive. And this section should net to zero. So here you can input previously agreed block transfers, and you should also record any proposed future years block transfers. Any supporting narrative for future years block transfers should be recorded in the block movements and disapplications free text box on the LA specific tab in the template, which we'll come on to in a minute. The fifth section in this table is your in-year net position. Cells within this section are auto-calculated and provide the overall in-year net position for each of the funding blocks. The sixth section is for other. So you've got row 47, council contribution, should be input as a negative figure. So use this to input both previously agreed transfers of funds and proposed requests to transfer funds. And then at the bottom of the table is your planned year-end position. Further down the financial tab, you've got other spend. This section contains lines from section 251 that don't come under the high needs expenditure section. The yellow cells are pre-populated and contain published data taken from section 251 outturn returns. Then the blue cells are for user input, allowing you to forecast up to and including 26-27 financial year if you wish to go that far. It's split into projected mitigated and unmitigated expenditure, and this data does not feed anywhere else in the template. Further down again, you've got the high needs blocks section. So no user input is required here. All the data is pre-populated using data pulled from elsewhere in the template. The total expenditure rows for each placement pull through data from the total expenditure row on each of the placement tabs within the template, which we're going to come on to. Year-on-year change cells are the difference between the current year's total and the previous year's total, and then the percentage change year-on-year is simply that difference as a percentage. Then finally, at the bottom of the financial tab is a graph which will populate as data is entered into the placement tabs. And we believe these graphs in the template will be useful when presenting data to stakeholders. The next tab along is the Children and Young People Summary tab. This tab collects data around numbers of EHCPs. The purple cells, again, are calculation cells which pull data from the placement tabs elsewhere in the template. And then the blue cells to the right allow you to input unmitigated figures to enable you to show impact of initiatives. Your forecast EHCP numbers should correlate to financial figures, taking into account mitigations and pressures. And please use the boxes on the LA specific tab to explain how figures have been reached, whether that's using past trends or detailed analysis of children's current and future needs. If you scroll down, again, you've got graphs which will show the data collated in the CYP tab. Next, there is the High Needs Recoupment tab. So for outturn data and forecast data to be on the same basis, high needs recoupment is required to be added back to the outturn figures. So this tab has been inserted into the management plan so financial data can be entered into the relevant cells to ensure all placement tabs record pre-recoupment. And recoupment figures must match March DSG allocation amounts and also local authorities DSG notes to account. Next tab is the Governance and Management tab. So the first table is for all relevant contributing parties to sign off the management plan. As I mentioned, we expect the management plan to be signed off by the DCS and the Section 151 officer within your local authority, and also across other areas which have contributed. Underneath that, you've got the workstream log. This is an optional tool, just enabling you to record internal workflow activity. And none of the input here feeds into any other cells within the template. Carrying on, we have the stakeholder engagement, co-production and consultation tab. This tab allows you to provide details on how you've engaged and will engage with your various stakeholders during the development and implementation of your plan. So you can provide details about relationships with stakeholders, any consultation processes you've carried out, plans for future engagement and collaboration. The sections for schools forum, education institutions, parents and carers, children and young people, health partners and elected members such as councillors. So LA specific tab. So on this tab, there are 3 text boxes for you to provide details regarding strategies and plans which relate specifically to your local authority. So for example, so I won't go through all of them. There is a couple of boxes relating to EHCPs where you can explain trends, what your main drivers are in your local authority, initiatives around EHCPs. As I've mentioned, there's the box for assumptions where we'd expect to see assumptions you've made around funding, EHCP numbers and so on, and why you've made those assumptions. There's the box for block movements and disapplications where you can explain plans for future disapplications and how they fit into your strategy. There's a box for capital where you can add your high-level plans for capital investment, and then further detail can be added to the placement tabs later in the template. And there's also boxes for key risks, workforce strategy, sharing practice, commissioning arrangements with CCGs, early years, and so on. And I'd encourage you to go to the guidance document as it provides further information around what detail is expected here and what assessments and considerations might be made under each category. Moving on to the placements tab. This tab is for narrative connected with each of the placement types. You can see the placement types listed at the top there. As mentioned earlier, these have been grouped to mirror the high needs benchmarking tool. So each placement type has 3 separate free text boxes to input narrative, and these are the same for each provision. So one for key pressures and issues, one for a summary of your strategy and approach to that placement type, and one for initiatives. And again, the guidance provides further information about what might be included here, what considerations might be made. It also tells you what to include where in regard to post-16 placements. Okay, along the bottom, there is a tab for each of the placement types. So this screen shows the mainstream tab. The first section is financial data, your expenditure. We've grouped the section 251 lines according to placement type. So some of those lines will be split over a number of tabs and others will be the gross total. Just to note, the pre-populated section 251 data is gross and therefore projected data must be input as gross as well for continuity. Like the rest of the template, it allows you to forecast up to including the 2026 to 2027 financial year. And again, there is projected mitigated and unmitigated expenditure. The tables which follow are for you to input EHCP data by age and primary need. There's also tables to record children and young people who don't have an EHCP or don't receive top-up funding but are still supported by the high needs block. These were added in response to local authority feedback saying we weren't always capturing the full picture, but may not be relevant for all local authorities. All these tables feed into the CYP tab, where the numbers are added up. If you were to scroll down, there are some more graphs which will populate as the data is input. Next slide shows the Resource and SEND Provisions tab. As you can see, it follows the same pattern as the Mainstream tab. So related Section 251 expenditure at the top, followed by EHCP data. All the placement tabs follow the same pattern apart from the Health and Social tab. I'm not going to show you every placement tab in this presentation, but there's also tabs for special schools, non-maintained special schools and independent, hospital schools and AP, post-16 and FE, health and social care, and other placements, and they all feed into the CYP tab and the executive summary. So that covers the template itself. We expect all local authorities to continually review their special provision and make sure it's good quality, value for money, and in line with available resources. For any local authority proposing a block movement, we'd expect to see an updated management plan in light of additional high needs funding. And just a reminder that the deadline for local authorities to submit a block movement request this year is the 18th of November. We hope not to make big changes to the template going forward, as we don't want to place additional burden on local authorities. However, it will be updated annually to reflect the latest data and any changes to the conditions of grant. The latest version that we published in April was mostly just updates to the data, but we did remove the high needs benchmarking tool because it made the file too big and clunky. The high needs benchmarking tool can still be found on gov.uk, and an updated version is due to be published this month. A link to it can be found on the cover tab in the template. And we do encourage local authorities to continue to use it to compare national figures and statistical neighbours, help identify whether an outlier, where spend and numbers are high or low, and help focus strategies. With regard to the template, we do continue to collate feedback to help us improve future iterations. So if you do have any feedback, please let us know via the financial management mailbox. And the financial management email address is on the slide there. If you have any questions regarding the template or guidance, or if you require any support, please do contact us at that email address there. So that's the end of the presentation.
There's been a number of questions around block transfers and school forum and a link to management plans. We would expect, well, if you're requesting a block transfer, it would be a good idea to show what that's going to be used for at the same time as asking for it, and so presenting the management plan and the block transfer request at the same time would make sense, but there's no specific regulations or requirement for you to do that. But obviously, if you're asking for 0.5% to be transferred, schools forum need to be cited on what that transfer's for and what impact it's going to have, not just financial, but on the outcomes and on pupils, EHCP plans, etc., and any mitigations it's going to be used for.